Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, welcoming you to the Caregiver Hour, hosted by our good friend Peter Rosenberger, where we air on the last Monday of every month at the 10 a.m. hour, the Caregiver Hour. Peter is an exceptional voice of experience for an unprecedented need. For more than 30 years, Peter has personally traveled the path of family caregiver. Through this journey, he discovered a caregiver can not only survive, but thrive in oftentimes grim circumstances. In an unparalleled journey with his wife, Gracie, Peter has navigated a medical nightmare that has mushroomed to 80 major operations, including the amputation of both of Gracie's legs below the knees. These difficult experiences led Peter to work with more than 80 treating physicians in 12 hospitals and 7 medical insurance companies, and medical bills soaring to more than $10 million. All these circumstances resulted in Peter developing a firm grasp of the healthcare issues faced by families with disabilities. Since 2013, he has carried his message of health and hope for the caregiver to the airways, hosting his own weekly show on iHeartMedia News Channel 1510 WLAC in Nashville, Tennessee. In September of last year, Peter took his radio show into syndication through the Truth Network. In addition to his Your Caregiver Minute which features on 380 stations. Just back, and when I mean just back from a grueling ministry trip with Standing with Hope, which is the website standingwithhope.com, from a trip to Ghana, where you not only are a voice, but you are actually the new hands and the new feet of a community. Peter Rosenberger, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me this time just to come and share some things on our hearts, some things that we've been working on for a long time. It was a great trip to Ghana. A lot of people ask us, first off, they ask, what is Standing with Hope? And Standing with Hope is the outreach that Gracie and I founded some time ago, the early 2000s. Our vision is for the wounded and for those who care for them. That's our vision. And the flagship program we started was the prosthetic limb outreach. After Gracie gave up both of her legs, she wanted to be able to reach her fellow amputees. She happened to be recovering from her second amputation. She had walked that morning in the hospital for the first time. She'd walked 10 steps as a double amputee. Later that afternoon, she was laying in bed recovering. Her right limb is still bandaged from the surgery. Her left leg had been amputated 4 years ago, so she'd been walking around on a prosthesis for 4 years, but now she's a double amputee, young woman in her 20s, and she happened to see a documentary about Princess Diana working with amputees in Southeast Asia, landmine victims. And she saw all these people who looked like her. And she said, I'm going to do something about this. And she felt like God laid on her heart at that point to reach her fellow amputees with prosthetics, quality prosthetics, in order to point them to the gospel. It's not enough to just give somebody a limb. One of the things we developed years ago, that if you put a limb on somebody, they're going to walk. If you teach and equip somebody to make limbs, hundreds will walk. And if you do both while sharing the gospel, then they're standing with hope. And that's the whole point of it. As for every limb we place on an amputee, we'll tell them, I said, look, when you face Christ one day, this prosthetic limb is not going to do you a bit of good. It will sustain you in this life. It will strengthen you and equip you in this life. But there's a greater need that you have more than amputation. And Gracie was originally looking at going into East Africa with this. To Eastern Europe with this. But through a series of events with Johnny Erickson Tata's organization, Wheels for the World, where they have a wheelchair distribution, and we met up with some of the players of that when we were speaking at one of her family retreats in Texas. And family retreats are these week-long family retreats, like they're called, where families with special needs children can come and get a respite. And so we were participating in one of those, singing and speaking and so forth. And we met up with some of her team. It was a long story, but a lot of God appointments. I think when you accept the label of Christian in your life and you put your trust in Christ, you relinquish your belief in coincidences at that point. You know, I don't see any place for coincidences for the people of God. I see God is moving with great purpose, and but it's we met these folks. They connected us up, and they said Ghana, and I said, well, I don't want to go to Ghana. I don't want to go to Africa. I didn't really want to go to Eastern Europe. I didn't really want to do this at all. This was Gracie's vision. And I was kind of like, this is not what I set my mind to do, but they kept saying it. And then we started running into people everywhere from Ghana. I mean, everywhere. And so at some point you just throw your hands up and say, I'm going. And on the first trip back there in 2005, on the way to Ghana, I was sitting in the plane. I'd never been outside the United States before. And I'm thinking, I can't believe I'm sitting on a plane going to Ghana. I was stunned by this, that I somehow was, hogtied and taken on a plane to go to West Africa and take Gracie. But we did. And what we started doing is we worked with Ghana Health Service, and they have a National Prosthetic and Orthotic Center right there in Accra. And it never occurred to us not to. Because we understand that with prosthetics, we're not a first responder. I don't want to go in there and build my own lab. I don't want to go in there and do my own thing. I want to take an existing infrastructure and enhance it, equip it, train them, and so forth. And I found out much later from my brother, who is a diplomat, Middle East expert specialist, and he told me, he's very high up in the State Department, and he told me, Peter, a lot of developing countries feel resentful because Christian organizations come in and they're so needy that they'll take anything they can get, but they often bypass the government and infrastructure. And he said, what you guys did sends a huge signal, and it has great value for diplomacy's sake and just for cooperation's sake. And I didn't even think about it. I just did it instinctively. And I'm grateful that God opened that channel for me, because they've been a great partner to work with. And the clinic, when we got there, was very disheveled. It was almost ready to be closed. I mean, they were carving wooden legs and using some kind of polyester hybrid. It was awful, and it was truly awful. We just jumped in, and we with both feet, if you'll pardon the pun, and we started doing this. And I think that they were thinking, okay, this has got some merit, but we've seen this before with Americans. They come over here, throw a lot of dust up in the air, and then they leave. But we came back. We came back 6 months later. And then we kept coming back and kept coming back, kept sending supplies. And we started building this thing up. Well, they've now enhanced their own program. They've hired younger workers. They've invested in some things. They've partnered with the Koreans who came in and really did a great job refurbishing this clinic. We did it 10 years ago. We painted it up and put curtains in it, really made it more attractive. We've purchased some equipment. We've sent tons of supplies. The Koreans are working with them on some services, so they allocated some money to really update it. And so we've been working there ever since. This has been my personal 11th trip over there. Gracie's been absent from this work for about 8 years because of some severe health issues she had starting in 2010. And she just is now starting to kind of climb out of that. Now, she's not well. She's never been well. But she's had seasons of strength, and then she's had seasons of real challenging circumstances. So this was a big moment for her to go over there, and she did. And we had a team of 6. And it cost her. I mean, there's no way around it. It cost her. In fact, she ended up leaving her leg on, or one of her legs on too long, and she got back. By the time she got onto the plane, the bottom of her amputated limb was just covered with blisters. I mean, quarter size, some of them. And it looks like hamburger. I mean, it has really been difficult for her. She can't walk. She won't be able to walk for at least a week, if not longer. I dressed her wound on the plane back. Once we closed the doors in Accra, she was able to, she had her leg on, which I didn't want her to have it on, but she had it on just to get onto the plane. And because it's not real handicap friendly over there.
Right.
I don't know if, but I took her leg off, and on the plane, I dressed her limb and bandaged it up and let her get some rest. And then when we got to New York, we got through customs and so forth. She didn't wear her leg. And then in Atlanta, I dressed it again. And then they were, but every time people asked about her, when they were the crew getting her on and off the plane, they're asking, well, what were you doing? What were you doing? And when she would tell them, and she was telling about Christ, and as they pulled her off the plane in Nashville on her last leg, and they have to use that aisle seat to get somebody with disabilities through the little aisles, and they transfer them, and then so they're pulling her off that in the aisle seat. They got her strapped in, and to her waiting wheelchair by the gate. She's got a bandaged limb. She could wear her other leg, but she had a bandaged limb, and I'm carrying her foot. In fact, I walk off first, and I'm carrying her leg. And I told some of the flight crew there, they were waiting to get on. I said, they won't let me bring the rest of her out until I pay my bill. They thought that was kind of funny. But she's telling them about Jesus as they are literally pulling her off the plane. They had to drag her off the mission field, so to speak. And she's telling about Jesus the whole way. And it is such a disconnect for the world to see somebody with such tremendous challenges who has such tremendous joy and excitement about what she does. And she'd tell you, if she's on right now, she'd tell you that she'd gladly pay it again, because what she got to do over there, and I would watch her with the patients, Eric. She would take her own limb off and show them her amputations and her stuff. You know, that's a very vulnerable moment. And she would do this in order to boast all the more gladly in her weakness, so that Christ's power may rest upon her. That's a verse that she just clings to in 2 Corinthians. And they would, I mean, the patients would push me over just to get to her, to hug her, because you know, and I wasn't important on this one. This was her. This was her vision. This was her doing it. And Gracie's one of those kind of people that you really can't manage her. You can't direct her or script her. You kind of have to aim her. And she's a force of nature. And when she gets in a moment like this, where she is ministering to wounded people who are in desperate need of comfort and the hope of Christ, it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We were working throughout the clinic, and you could hear her singing in the other room to patients, "Great is thy faithfulness." I mean, just name it. She's going through hymns. "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus." And that voice of hers, which is so magnificent, just echoed through this clinic. And at one point, one of the most touching points for me was she was talking to a 17-year-old girl named Ellen. And Gracie was hurt when she was 17. This girl lost her leg at 17. She's an above-knee amputee. And Gracie, this was the last day of clinic. There's nothing left of Gracie. I mean, she has truly depleted herself. And she's reading this scripture to this girl. And Gracie's sitting in the chair. Her leg is just on fire. She hurts. Her back is hurting. Everything about her hurts. And she's reading this, and she starts to weep as she's reading this. And the little girl, well, she was 17, but she just reached up and she just put her hand on Gracie's shoulder and just held her as Gracie wept while reading scripture to her. You know, I can describe it in vivid detail, but there's really no way you can process it till you experience that, till you see it right there in front of you, to watch how Christ moves in our brokenness. And we had a lot of overlap because I would talk to the families of these patients. And I remember one lady we put a leg on, and her brother was there, and he was doing everything, helping her get to the bathroom and everything. And I stopped her, and I said, now that's going to stop, because she was walking. We got her up walking. And I looked at her brother, and I said, this leg is just as much for you as it is for her. She has 2 good legs now, and she can walk to the bathroom. She can be more independent. And it's going to take a little bit more time for her to get it, used to it, but she can do this. And this leg is for you as well. And so those were powerful moments for me as a caregiver, to be able to talk with the family on how they were able to start regaining themselves in this, because caregiving knows no borders. Caregiving knows no race, nationality, religious creed, or anything. Nothing. If you love somebody, it's the same all over. You're going to end up having someone in your life that you got to take care of. And the feelings are the same no matter what community you're from. And so it was very meaningful. I had one young man taking care of his mother, Esther, who lost both of her legs. She was a teacher and actually a headmaster of a school. And she wants to go back and start teaching Bible school at churches and so forth. She's 60 years old now. And I watched her get up and wearing her new legs with shoes on it that were Gracie's tennis shoes. And she's standing on Gracie's shoes. And she's literally standing on Gracie's faith. And I told her son, John, I said, now look, he's not able to work. He's a satellite repairman for a tech company or whatever. And I said, I want you to be able to go back to work. I want you to be able to start being more independent for yourself here and do this. And I gave him my book, and I talked to them a lot of times. So there's story after story after story of just deeply meaningful moments because, when you're ministering to the wounded, it is not a slight ministry, and it costs you something to touch people in their woundedness. It cost our Savior something, and why should we be any different? And this is not the kind of ministry you can run from behind a desk. You have to touch, embrace, smell everything about this ministry. These people who are just like us, dealing with very difficult stuff, and there's despair, there's heartache, there's anger, there's all those things, and we are committed to take the hope of the gospel into those things.
Peter, you collect prosthetics, limbs. I need to turn your volume down just a little bit, get a little feedback.
Okay, sorry.
You collect limbs from various resources. How do you get those parts in? What's the network?
We put out a plea regularly on my show, and it's on the web, and we collect limbs in from, and you can just, if you type in recycle prosthetic limbs, you Google that or donate a used limb, you'll get to us. And they go to a local prison here in Nashville. And it's run by Core Civic, which is based out of Nashville. And it's one of their many faith-based programs. And inmates volunteer to do this. And they love to do it. It's very interesting work. Limbs come in from all over the country. They will disassemble these limbs. We enter them in. We build a computer system, inventories that come in. And they will disassemble them for us, so that we can strip them down and use all the available parts. Now, you can't use everything about a prosthetic limb. The socket, for example, which is what fits to the residual limb of the patient, that is custom fit for that patient. If you reuse that, you're going to hurt somebody. So that's what we build over in Ghana. We build those things custom fit, brand new over in Ghana. But the pylons, the adapters, the connectors, the screws, the knees, the feet, all those, the belts, that they can all be recycled. The liners, the sleeves, if they're in good shape, can all be reused. We had several patients that we've treated, legacy patients that we've had for some time, that came in, they just needed a new foot. We didn't have to build them a new socket. We just replaced the foot, make sure everything was aligned, send them on their way, they're going. And that's the whole point of it. And so they'll collect all these things over there and inventory, and when we get a full load, we'll send it on out to Ghana, either by air freight or by sea. I sent this last one by sea. And right now, for example, I need some pediatric parts. We had some children over there that we were just running short on pediatric pylons, pediatric knees, pediatric feet. And so and that doesn't require a patient in the U.S. die. I mean, kids are going through limbs like candy because they're growing. So if you know of somebody, or if somebody's listening today that knows of somebody who has a child who's an amputee that's outgrown a limb, please, please, please send that to us. Go to standingwithhope.com and donate that limb, and I promise you somebody else will walk, particularly if we really need some pediatric parts right now. And send the shoes. I had to go to the market and buy multiple pairs of shoes for patients who come in with just sandals. So if you got shoes, and if you only have one leg, don't just send one shoe with that, but send both shoes, because I've collected an odd assortment of shoes now. So if you've got if they've outgrown a shoe, send that with it, and a pair of shoes, because the kids that are coming over there always need, sandals is the go-to footwear. And so I have to go buy them either sneakers or dress shoes or whatever, but comfortable fitting shoes that have a toe to it and everything else. Open-toed shoes just don't work too well with prosthetics.
So I'm looking at the Standing with Hope website, and the question is answered, what's the #1 cause of amputation worldwide? And it's due to complication from disease, specifically, you say diabetes. Which we know that there are worldwide. It's a global problem. Well,
think about it. What is the diet of most poor people? High in starch. So that's sugar. Poor diet in poverty-stricken areas, they're going to eat high starch diet, and they're going to gain weight, and they're going to develop diabetes because of sugar, and then they end up losing a limb. That's just the way it works. We got that problem in America too, by the way. And then a lot of the kids we treat, theirs is trauma. I mean, the traffic over there is nuts, and they're not. The traffic laws are more like suggestions, and so kids are not as closely guarded, and they get trauma. I've seen scorpion bites that led to infections. I've seen snake bites. I've seen that led to infection, had to be amputated. Burns. Electrical burns. We had a guy that lost both hands. He was 21 years old working on a wire, and it burned him and cost him both of his hands. So all that kind of stuff. There's all that, but when it comes to young people, but for the most part, if they're over 35 or 40, it's usually diabetes.
What's so interesting about Standing with Hope and Hope for the Caregiver is that while you have a team and you have machinery over there, which is custom making the sockets. You need a vacuum pump, a cast saw, and a socket grinder. You have a clinic over there now that has all of this. While they're working, the team is working on fitting and taking these assembled or assembling the various parts and pieces and making the custom fit for the socket. You're ministering to the caregivers and walking them through what this new season is going to look like and how they need to also be looking out for themselves. Same message you carry here that says that if the caregiver is debilitated because of stress, lack of sleep, overworked, overstressed, has no help.
Enabling.
They wind up
enabling is an equal opportunity offender. So many people fall in that enabling trap. They feel sorry for them, they feel whatever, and then they end up enabling a behavior that is destructive, or that whole codependent mixture there goes on. So it's all, everything we deal with here, we deal with over there.
It's just fascinating to me. We're talking with Peter Rosenberger, host of the Caregiver Hour here on Revealing the Truth on the last Monday of every month at 10 o'clock a.m. He's just returned from a trip on the 17th. You just came back this weekend, so you're still jet lagging and still out there talking about it. We're going to take a break, and when we come back from break, I want to talk about the one video that I watched where your team spent 12 hours in order to properly fit one of the patients coming to clinic. This is not a snap-on tool. This is
not Lego.
Right. This is not something where you go there and you have a line of people lined up. You hand out a basket. You hand out food. You paint a building. You bring in bags of clothes, and everybody shakes hands and everybody welcomes. This is medical treatment in the prosthetic area that's very specialized, that is radically changing the lives of people while they are hearing the gospel message. They know that the reason that Gracie herself is there, you've been there many times without her, but for her to go and to endure, how many hours of air?
Just from New York to Accra is over 10 hours.
Back.
That's actual flight time. You got to get to the airport. You got to go through all the mess and sit on the tarmac.
So you went Nashville, Atlanta, JFK, JFK to Ghana, all right, and then Ghana by Jeep or by over-the-road
Well, we did, the airport's not far from the hotel, so that worked out really well. We keep everything. Once we get in Ghana, we're very close, circular there. So I'll get into all that after the break. But yeah, it's a tough trip on her.
It is a tough trip. We're talking with Peter Rosenberger, host of this, the Caregiver Hour, right here on Revealing the Truth. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear about this miraculous story of endurance, of commitment, of Christ-like commitment on the part of the team that refused to give up until this man, after 12 hours of them fitting, working, and ministering to him, finally was able to get up and walk out the room. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Back. Hello and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, welcoming you to the Caregiver Hour, hosted by our good friend Peter Rosenberger. Caregivers with Hope and Standing with Hope is the website, standingwithhope.com. You can learn all about caregivers, all about caregiving, and all about their prosthesis program that they have with their workshop in Ghana. Peter, welcome back. Not only back to the show, but back to the States, because you left on the 17th. You came back, when did you get back? On Saturday?
We got back Saturday night at midnight.
Saturday night at midnight. So you're still, and what's the time difference?
5 hours from Nashville.
5 hours from Nashville. So that's really not, that's not a terrible one, but it still has its effect.
It does, and but you know, we hit the ground running. We worked. In fact, we dumped all of our stuff at the hotel and went straight to the clinic. I left Gracie at the hotel with. I had a lady that came just to help Gracie over there, and so the rest of the team went over to the clinic as soon as we landed, and we're getting things kind of set up. And then Sunday morning we were at church. Gracie and I spoke at church. The church we go to there, wonderful church, and sang. And in fact, when she was singing. Couple of the worship band of the church got up from the congregation when she was speaking and got up and started singing with her, which was just wonderful. I mean, it was just wonderful. And then I took the team that had not been there before, just kind of we did a little sightseeing around Accra, and then we went back to the hotel, had dinner, got everything going, and then we hit the ground Monday. We worked till dinner, come back, eat dinner, debrief. Go to bed, get up, do it the next. This is not vacationary. This is hard work, very specialized work. I will tell you this, Eric. This will mean something to you. A friend of mine put me onto this a while back. When I fly overseas, I usually get a kosher meal, and because and I'm not Jewish, even though with the last name Rosenberger, but I felt like he told me, he said, you got a better shot of the food being safer.
Yes, no question. I always order a kosher meal, and I don't keep kosher, but I always order a kosher meal. It's just you get a better guarantee.
Well, and a lot of times they'll serve you first, so I was like, I'm okay with that.
There you go.
But it's I want to tell you, you had asked about this one patient. His name is Benedictus. Which is a great name. Isn't that a great name? Benedictus. Benedictus is 34 years old. He had an accident that caused what is called a hip disarticulation. Now, if you can have a below knee like Gracie, you can have an above knee, and where you'll have a limb that just kind of comes. Well, it's just like it says, but it comes down about halfway from the waist to the knee, usually. And then a hip disarticulation is amputated through the hip. So they don't even really have anything over here on the right. And you have to build kind of a half of a bucket for them you almost have to build half of their rear. And they have to have two joints. They have to have a hip joint, and then they have to have a knee joint. This is the most difficult prosthesis to build, or certainly at the top of them. It's very labor intensive, but it's also very parts intensive. And Benedictus is a pretty good sized fella, pretty tall fella. And so we needed a long pylon, and we have tons of pylons, but we didn't have a long one, and we couldn't find it. So we were trying. We disassembled that leg probably 6 or 7 times, trying to make the parts work. We kept coming up about 2 inches short, and all that, you know. And we had the hip joint, we had the knee joint, we had all that stuff, and we built the prosthesis, the thing to fit around him and all that stuff, and then we got to the end and we couldn't find the proper rivets to put into the straps, and we were digging around trying to find rivets. I mean, of all things, copper rivets with washers, and then we put the straps on it to hold it in place. But the straps that they had there were not very strong, and we ended up having to. They broke, and so we found some nylon webbing, and we sewed it to the leather. Gerald himself there's a sewing machine there. That's part of prosthesis. You're going to have a sewing machine, and he was over there. He was sewing the leather to this nylon strap. I mean, you can't really imagine the amount of detail that goes into this. And then we were looking, and there is a long, complicated story about the stock room, because Ghana Health Services, they had assigned a new guy to take care of it, and he was always gone, and he's the only one with the key, and we had to go in there and look for it. And we're trying to make sure everything gets put into the actual clinic building and not stored over in an off-site building. And we thought we've got to. I told Gerald, I said, I know I have a long pylon somewhere over there. And we looked and couldn't find it. And then Lori, one of our team members, picked up a pylon and said, about this one, but it was real thin. It was really more of a pediatric long pylon, and it wouldn't have worked. But I saw something under it. There was a big pile of them, and I pulled out, and there was one pylon that was long enough for Benedictus' leg, because you got to think about it. He's got to have from the knee to the foot, and he's a tall guy. And we found one. And if I'd known they didn't have it, they didn't let me know on the front end, I could have brought some. But this is not the kind of stuff you could just run out to the store with it. You're in Ghana. You have to adapt. I mean, you're MacGyvering things up. And we did it, and Benedictus was very patient. He was incredibly gracious. And the reason, not only just we want to treat him, because we would treat him no matter what, but what made this guy special is he's a teacher of elementary school students. He has 53 students that he teaches. He's in the Volta region, which is near the Togo border, about 3 hours away. This guy has the ability to impact significant amounts of people and their culture. And he's a believer. And Gracie apologized profusely to him about the delay. And he looked at her and he just put his hand on her hand. He says, "It's okay. This is Africa. This is Africa, and it happens. And so I have to wait." He said, "But, I hear in America that you can no longer pray in schools. We can do that here." So it kind of balances out. And it was just the most matter-of-fact way he said it, and Gracie just was weeping because he was willing to wait, and he saw, as bad as this is, at least I get to pray with my kids in school. And how do you respond to that? How do you respond to that? Because, and I look how sad for America. What an indictment on America.
Yes.
And as we look, and I don't mean to beat up on America. I love our country, but we have lost so much in this country that is precious, that we as Christians have Keith Green said it best back in 1980 in a song. He said, "The world is dying in the dark and the church can't help because we're asleep in the light." And I think sometimes we as American Christians have been a little we've dozed off in the light too much. And but Benedictus was a very special man, and to watch him walk, and he has to kind of swing his hip and then swing the knee. It's a very complex set of things that the human body is not easy to reproduce and replicate, and we're poor replicators at that. What God did is extraordinary, but this man's able to walk, and he's able to bend his knee, and he can get on a bus now and sit there and bend his knee so he's not cramped in it. We provided snacks and food and water and so forth for the patients, and reading material. Coloring books were a big hit for adults and children. And Gracie just sat there for the longest time and just sat with him and just talked and sat with him, prayed, read scripture, sang. And then at the end, it was very emotional for all of us to watch him, because we knew that this was a very special man who deserved our absolute best for him. And we don't know the impact. I talked to him about the leg, because normally he would want a covered leg. And I said, I wouldn't cover this. I'd let your students see it. Let them see the math. Let them see the science. Let them see the physics of it. What better educational tool? And every time he talks about it, he'll be able to use this as a means to be able to share his students the faith and what the story behind all this. You don't know the impact of this. You really don't. You just do it, and you trust that God will you cast your bread upon the water. But it was an extremely emotional moment when he got up and walked for all of us, because so much work went into this. And this was one day we spent all day on it, but that's not including all the time we'd spent building it up to that day, to cast him and to build the device and so forth. So it's an extraordinary ministry that is very difficult for people to really wrap their minds around how labor intensive it is. We don't assembly line patients. Every patient is unique. Every patient has a story. Every patient has a family. Every patient is involved with with their desires of their heart. And one of the things I love to do is ask the patients. I said, "Okay, you can walk. What do you want to do?" And it's interesting to watch them express their heart. I want to be able to do this. I want to teach. I want to go back. I want to serve my church. I want to. Little Ellen, 17-year-old, she wants to be a nurse. She can do it, and so that's Benedictus. That's only one of the stories, but it was an amazing story.
Well, that's one you chronicled on Facebook, and I want to encourage people to follow you on Facebook. They can follow you at Peter Rosenberger. They can follow you at Standing with Hope. There are a lot of ways to follow you, but we are focused on the magnitude. 65 million Americans are caregivers. The global number is got to be staggering.
Yeah.
It's inestimable. There's just no way for us to get a grip. Yet you have a ministry to the wounded, which is Standing with Hope, and you have a ministry to those who are taking care of the wounded. So this is a two-edged sword that you, through the experience, and I want people to understand, this wasn't an accident that happened 5 years into your marriage, 10 years into your marriage, and you had to deal with this. Gracie's accident happened before you proposed to her, before you married her.
Before I met her.
Before you met her. So your heart for this woman, and knowing, now you know what you didn't know at the time, but yet there has never been, in all the time I've known you, a single inkling of regret, a single inkling of, there's been a lot of self-analysis of your mistakes and your errors along the way, and how you came to become someone to give a testimony about caregiving, because when you navigated it, you found the ditches. When you navigated caregiving in the beginning, you found all those issues that you write so eloquently about. You found and came face to face with every one of them on a personal level. This is not just your ministry, this is your testimony. This is the testimony of what is it like to willingly, I want people to imagine this. I have a family friend who is in a wheelchair, and she struggles, and she is one of the most beautiful, loving, intelligent. She is a speech therapist who broke her back in a fall, an accidental fall off a cliff, and broke her back as a teenager. Went on to college, went on, got her master's degree, became a speech therapist, and lives independently in a wheelchair, and has someone to help her as she needs it. But the sheer strength, the sheer will to continue in a state of being debilitated and not seeing yourself as being debilitated. Gracie does not see herself as being debilitated. She sees herself as saved by grace, as an ambassador, the same way Joni Eareckson Tada is an ambassador who is a quadriplegic, to get out there and spread the gospel message that says, you know what, your pain may be internal, mine's visible. You know, fortunately mine's visible, but it's the hidden internal that you help people navigate. And it's really quite incredible because people are suffering in an incredible way. But this ministry...
I think people are in bondage a lot, Eric, on a lot of levels. And it takes someone who understands that to speak into their bondage. You know? I mean, I think that if you've been touched by the magnificence of God's grace, you will be able to effectively speak into the lives of other people. I'll give you an example. This is one of the more poignant moments. Wanda came over to the clinic. The housekeeper at the hotel we stayed at saw us. And I told this team there that had never been there before, I said, you need to understand, our mission trip is not limited to the patients we treat. There are flight attendants, flight crews, passengers on every plane, at the hotel, guests. Everybody's going to see us. Gracie kind of stands out. Gerald walks around in shorts as an amputee himself, and he was a prosthetist. And so we stand out, and they're going to ask. Well, this girl saw us. She asked her boss, we've known him for years at the hotel, and he approached me as I was coming off the elevator, and he said, there's a lady who does the housekeeping, cleans your room. She saw you guys. Her sister lost her leg. Can she bring her to the clinic? I said, yeah, bring her on. And so we saw her that day. Now, that morning when Wanda got up, she did not know she was going to receive a leg that day. She went to the clinic because her sister took her over there. They show up. She sees Gerald walk around the corner. She sees him walking on a prosthetic limb, walking normally. And she was stunned. She started crying. Then she sees Gracie come around the corner, and then she just broke down. And we cast her, and Gracie held her while Gerald cast her. She came back on Friday. She walked. She got up. It was very emotional. The whole thing was just incredibly emotional. But then something happened afterwards. Nobody else saw this but me. The rest of the team was working, but I saw as they're going out the parking lot area of where this clinic is. There was at the orthotic shop on the other side of it, a security guard thought they were bringing a wheelchair back because her sister was pushing an empty wheelchair while Wanda was walking with crutches. We wanted her to walk with crutches till she got used to it. And she's walking. And the wheelchair's empty. They thought they were bringing the wheelchair back, and they realized it was her wheelchair. And there was a guy over here, and I didn't realize that. I saw this dark figure kind of plop over here beside me. And I thought it was an animal at first. It was huge. And I realized it was a guy that had polio, big man, bigger than me. And he had polio, and he was crawling along on his hands. And they thought she was bringing the wheelchair back. And I told her, I said, I really want her to keep this wheelchair for a little bit longer. We can get him one through Johnny and Friends and so forth, and I gave him the information. But I watched Wanda getting the guy's information. We had just put a leg on her, and she hadn't even got out of the parking lot, and she's wanting to give her wheelchair away to this guy. And I thought, that's, as believers, what we do. Out of our own recovery, out of our own redemption, it can't help but spill out into others. And I'm not questioning anybody's faith, but I have to raise an eyebrow every now and then, because if you are not pouring into others, what's going on with you?
Right.
I mean, this magnificent grace of God cannot be contained in one person. It's going to flow out of you. It has to. It's too big for one individual. And I watched this with Wanda. She couldn't even get out of the parking lot, and she wanted to minister to somebody else. And that's what walking and leaping and praising God looks like, Acts chapter 3. Walking and leaping and praising God. And I thought, as believers, we really need to examine ourselves on this. Are we missing an opportunity to the suffering that is right in front of us to say to someone who is hurting, let me tell you about this Jesus. Let me give you practical help and lift you up in whatever you're dealing with. Maybe they have a loved one that has a substance abuse problem. You don't just say, I'll pray for you. You say, have you been to Al-Anon? You know, have you seen counseling about this? Have you been to your own doctor? And then you're able to, now you're speaking to the need, the core need of the body. And what is it James said? If you say to somebody, be warm and filled with the Spirit, but you don't do anything what's for the body, what good are you? We can do something for their body. We can do something for their spirit. We don't have to fix it because we can't fix it. Don't put that pressure on yourself. I can't fix these people. All I can do is provide them a prosthetic limb through our ministry. But what I can do is give them the tools to sustain them on their journey and point them to the source of the one who can speak to their core need. And remember when they lowered the paralytic down on the roof there, Jesus spoke to his core need first and then lifted him up. And sometimes these people, when they come into the clinic, they don't need me to say, hey, here's a leg. They just need a human touch to say, you know what? You are welcome here. We are glad you're here. And just to love on them and care for them. And oh, by the way, you're going to walk. You know, we don't need to be in such a rush to throw a solution at people. I would rather just embrace them where they are and let God unfold it out. And we minister out of our own wounds. You know, Gracie and I understand that. And maybe it takes somebody like us who have journeyed through this for so long to be able to understand these concepts. Gracie's problem is not a disability. It's not the loss of her legs. Gracie will tell you what she deals with is the relentless onslaught of suffering that she deals with, the pain that it never stops. And so when it's relentless suffering, God uses suffering throughout all of Scripture for very strategic kingdom purposes. There's something about suffering that drives us to our knees and forces stuff out of us that then God reaches into and pulls out something magnificent. I don't know. I don't know all these things. I can just tell you that we deal with relentless suffering in our home. And because we've chosen to put our scared hand into his scarred hand, he does something extraordinary with what we thought was tragedy. And that's what we invite other people to do as well, to trust him as well with their tragedy, with their sorrow, with their pain, with their husband who was an alcoholic, with their special needs child, with their broken marriage, whatever it is. We trust him with our wounds and with our scars. It's hard. It's unpleasant. Sometimes it's bloody. But then we get to see the magnificent work of grace in ways that we never dreamed.
This is a clarion call for every believer who longs to do something and you don't know what to do. I've been to hundreds of churches and there's always a collection box for food. Stick a collection box out there for prosthetic limbs. Stick a collection box out there that just says that you're going to stand with hope. It doesn't have to be a mission. It doesn't have to be a mission budgeted item, but in a congregation of hundreds of people, somebody knows somebody somewhere that has gone through prosthetic limbs. We have people pass away. What do they do with those prosthetic limbs? You have people who have adjustments. You have children that as they grow, outgrow. There's a place and there's a way to make this useful to change lives. All over the world, this happens to be a ministry in Ghana, but it touches the lives of inmates in prison in Tennessee. It touches the lives of all kinds of people who are on this team. I want you to visit standingwithhope.com, read about this, and if this doesn't touch your heart, then I want you to go to your cardiologist to check and see if you have a heart. Peter Rosenberger, host of the Caregivers Hour. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Welcome back from Ghana. Next month, Peter and Gracie Rosenberger will be hosting the Caregiver Hour right here on the last Monday of every month at the 10 o'clock hour. God bless you, my friend. Welcome back, and thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. May the Lord bless all the works of your hands.
Thank you so much, Eric.
God bless you, my friend. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.